is one, the environment. If you like birds, if you like mammals, if you like any type of wildlife, plastic pollution is something that touches species all over the world. And it doesn't matter if you're on land, on water, high up in the air, or deep in the sea. It touches every species around the world through ingestion, entanglement, and all manner of physical harm. The second reason is society. If you care about society, if you care about economies, if you care about livelihoods and people, plastic pollution has a negative impact on tourism, on fisheries, and all of the mechanisms that the ocean uses to balance out our planet and to keep it healthy. And then third, it affects us. So at a very basic level, microplastics has been found in human blood, in human tissue. And while we're still understanding all of the implications from a chemical standpoint, the fact that that is physically present in our body and that we know that there are endocrine disrupting chemicals and different types of carcinogens that typically get added to plastics in the development, we should be concerned that it's accumulating in our body. But I'm going to sneakily add in the fourth one, which is that it is a solvable problem. Mm-hmm. We designed our way into this problem. We should be able to design our way out of it. And it's going to take not only design, but also education, different types of infrastructure, and creativity across the board. So while it is a global, visible, and harmful problem, at its core, it really is solvable. And that's what I want people to know.
All right. So a simple question, but a tricky one.
Okay.
Right? Different places use different materials. Mm-hmm. When you've been traveling around the world, what do we see in different places that caught your attention?
Yeah.
What is the most common thing, the most unusual thing?
It's a very good question.
What is the average thing we normally find pretty much everywhere?
Mm-hmm. So I always say that the generation of waste is a very basic human function, but what that waste looks like is very different across the globe. And we do see different types of material that get used and also that end up as waste in different places. I will say that quite ubiquitously, we see tobacco products like cigarettes and cigarette packaging, and then food plastic like plastic wrappers, utensils, cups, and plates and things. Pretty much ubiquitously are the top items that we see as litter from the US to South and Southeast Asia to South America to remote islands. Those are typically the top products. But I will say that a lot of communities are more used to alternative materials or are getting back into ulterior materials. Wow, that's a fun one to say, isn't it? Alternative materials.
That I can do.
Arterial materials. So there are some cultures that still use, banana leaves for wrappers instead of, certain types of plastic, or that will, are very comfortable bringing in glass jugs to refill different types of household products, or reusable jute bags to refill things like grain and beans and whatnot. So there are communities around the world that are more used to using those type of products. And in those places, we see less litter of single-use plastic products. But it looks very different all over the world. Sure. It depends where you are. So there are different types of plastics out there. Microplastic is something that we hear about a lot, and technically that is fragments or pieces of plastic that are less than 5 millimeters in size. And that can be hard plastic fragments, it can be foam or film plastic fragments, and it can also be fibers, so the type of microplastic that comes off of your clothing. And this is a particularly difficult issue because once it gets to the point of tiny pieces of microplastic that are in the environment and the water and the air, it's extremely difficult and extremely expensive to try to get them out of there. So a lot of the work that we do is trying to prevent it from getting to the point of microplastics in the environment in the first place. But microplastic can either be small in origin, so things like microbeads that you find in some types of personal care like skin care. It can also be something that's been in the environment and broken down over a long period of time. Plastic never truly biodegrades in the environment. It just keeps fragmenting into smaller and smaller pieces. So a piece of plastic that's been out in the ocean for a long time will be broken down by sun, by UV exposure, by waves, by energy, and things like that, and it'll just keep getting smaller and smaller. And then when it gets to that size, it's more likely to, say, be eaten by a fish that might be then eaten by a bigger fish that might be eaten by a human. Or it can go up into the atmosphere, or it can get stuck in the sediments. It really is an insidious problem once it gets to the point of microplastic in the environment. So one of the big questions that I get asked around plastic pollution is, what can I do as an individual to address this problem? And the good news about plastic pollution is that everyone on the planet can do something to tackle this issue. You can get involved in citizen science. So like the debris tracker app that I was talking about, there are lots of organizations around the world that want to know what's out there, that want to know what you're using. And plastic is something that everyone touches every day. So it's really easy and fun to get involved in citizen science and contribute to some of that data collection. Also, there is a lot of power as a consumer in the decisions that you make. With every dollar that you spend, you are making a vote towards a certain type of organization and business. And you can make sustainable choices if you have the ability to go for more natural products, to use refillable and durable and reusable products. There are lots of things that you can do as a consumer to curb this issue. You can also know your waste. A lot of people, especially in the United States, we've created a really good system whereby you put your waste on the curb at the end of the day and it disappears forever and you never have to see it again. If you know what happens to your waste after you put it in that bin, after it goes in a truck, what happens to it after that, that'll make you a better steward of that recycling and that waste and that compost and whatever type of infrastructure you use. So there is no away, and it's important to know where your waste goes. The other thing is just getting involved. So there is a global treaty in discussion now with the United Nations around plastic. It's hopefully going to be a global and legally binding agreement that's going to both reduce, rethink, and then also sort of recirculate the types of plastics that we create around the world. But we need top-down and bottom-up policies. So support different types of policies, of practices, of pilot programs that are happening in your community, in your state, in your country. All of these pieces really fit together and they need to work together to be able to solve this problem. So there's a lot that people can do. Hey Kike, one of the things that we use to collect data on litter around the world is the debris tracker app, which is free, open source. Anyone in the world can use it, and we've actually had over 7 million items logged from every continent around the world so far. But the way that you use this tool is you can scroll through the lists and you can track the type of litter that you see in your own backyard. Not all plastic, we're interested in all different types of litter. And then what it'll give you is a really good breakdown of what you actually found. So once you track the litter in an area, you'll get a great map that shows you what you tracked and how far you went, what are the top litter items that you see, what are the top material types. Not surprisingly, it's usually plastic items, and it's usually things like cigarettes and food wrappers. But it's a really easy to use tool. It makes litter documenting really fun, and it democratizes data in this area. So anyone around the world can figure out what's in their own backyard, and they can use that knowledge to have the changes that they want to make in their community, be it policy change, behavior change, but it really puts the data in the hands of people that have the best opportunity to use it.
Last questions.
Yeah,
what is
please.
the biggest lesson you've learned in your career?
The biggest lesson I've learned in my career at all?
You have to highlight one.
Biggest lesson that I've learned is that there are no stupid questions, and don't be afraid to ask people to coffee. I swear I've had some of the most interesting conversations in my life, but also some of the most door opening opportunities have come from just going to people that I really admire or I find their work really interesting and asking them to coffee and listening and absorbing. And I think that that's a really powerful thing, especially nowadays when we're, a lot of people are remote and it's can be sometimes hard to connect. Taking the time to sit down and listen to someone that you really admire and share your ideas and thoughts with them and see what happens. I think that that's a really powerful thing, and it's often undervalued.